The great chamber on Nexus Prime buzzed with the voices of 100 different alien species. The dome-shaped room stretched high above, its walls covered in holographic displays showing star maps and trade routes. This was where the most powerful beings in the galaxy made decisions that affected billions of lives. Ambassador Crick stood at the center podium, his green scales catching the light from the floating orbs above. The tall reptilian creature had served the Zephyrian Empire for 40 years, and his voice carried the weight of authority when he spoke to the assembled delegates. "My fellow coalition members," Crix began, his forked tongue flicking out as he spoke. "We gathered today to discuss the reports from our outer rim territories. Some of you claim to have evidence of a species called humans. I am here to tell you that these reports are nothing more than stories." The chamber fell quiet. Representatives from dozens of worlds leaned forward in their seats, eager to hear what the powerful Zephyrian had to say. Crix had never been wrong about military matters before. "For 3 years we have heard tales from frightened traders and confused miners," Crix continued. "They speak of ghost ships that appear and disappear without warning. They tell stories of ancient ruins with strange symbols. They even claim to have intercepted radio signals in an unknown language." A delegate from the ice world of Frostheim raised one of his forearms. "Ambassador Crix, our deep space monitors have detected unusual energy signatures in the dead zones. These readings do not match any known technology." Crix waved dismissively. "Energy signatures can be explained by natural phenomena: solar flares, magnetic storms, dying stars. The universe is full of mysteries that we do not yet understand. This does not mean we should invent fairy tales to explain them." High above the chamber, hidden in the maintenance tunnels that ran through the station's superstructure, Jake Peterson watched the proceedings through a tiny camera lens. The human officer had been monitoring coalition communications for 6 months, gathering intelligence on their military movements and political discussions. Jake was 45 years old, with gray hair at his temples and lines around his brown eyes that spoke of years spent in deep space. He wore the dark blue uniform of the United Earth Space Command, though no alien in the galaxy would recognize the insignia on his collar. Beside him in the cramped tunnel, Lieutenant Lisa Grant shook her head in amazement. The young woman had joined the reconnaissance team fresh from the hidden training facilities in the Kuiper Belt. She had blonde hair tied back in a regulation ponytail, and green eyes that missed nothing. "They really believe we're extinct," Lisa whispered into her comm unit. 50 years of hiding and they still think Earth was the only human world." Jake touched his earpiece, listening to the discussion below. "Good. Let them keep believing. The longer they think we're just stories, the better our chances when the time comes." Down in the chamber, Crix was showing holographic images of the sectors where human activity had been reported. The star map showed vast, empty regions of space, areas that the Coalition had written off as worthless after their surveys found no valuable resources. "Look at these regions," Crix said, pointing with a clawed finger. "Dead space. No inhabitable worlds. No mineral wealth. No strategic value. Why would any intelligent species choose to live in such a wasteland? The answer is simple. They would not." An elderly delegate from the gas giant Nimbus stood up slowly. His species had been part of the Coalition for only 20 years. After, their homeworld was conquered and their people enslaved. "Ambassador, with respect, our ancestors also lived in regions you once called worthless. Perhaps these humans found ways to survive that we do not understand." Crix's scales darkened with anger. The Nimbus people were discovered because they built cities and transmitted signals into space. They made themselves known. If these humans truly existed, if they had the technology to travel between stars, we would have found them by now. Jake felt his jaw tighten as he listened to the debate. The Coalition had destroyed Earth 53 years ago, believing they had wiped out humanity completely. They had no idea that 3 million humans had escaped in the massive colony ships built in secret during the final years before the attack. Those survivors had scattered to the furthest edges of the galaxy, to regions so hostile and remote that the Coalition had never bothered to explore them thoroughly. There in the cold darkness between stars, Humanity had rebuilt itself into something stronger and more determined than ever before. The hidden human colonies had grown slowly and carefully. They built their cities inside asteroids and on the dark sides of rogue planets. They developed new technologies that could harvest energy from solar wind and cosmic radiation. Most importantly, they learned to hide their presence from any scanning technology the Coalition possessed. "Sir," Lisa whispered, "we're getting a signal from the Retribution. Admiral Blake wants a status report." Jake nodded and activated his secure transmitter. The signal would be bounced through 3 relay stations hidden in the asteroid fields before reaching the human fleet. "Shadow Wing to Fleet Command. The Coalition Council is proceeding as expected. No signs that they suspect our true numbers or capabilities." The response came back within minutes. Admiral Susan Blake's voice was calm and professional, but Jake could hear the steel beneath her words. "Understood, Shadow Wing. Continue monitoring. Operation Ghostbreaker begins in 72 hours. Jake felt a chill run down his spine. He had been waiting for this moment for 5 years, ever since the reconnaissance mission began. Soon the galaxy would learn that humanity was not only alive, but ready to make the Coalition pay for their crimes. Back in the chamber below, Crix was concluding his presentation with typical Zephyrian arrogance. "The Coalition has spent the last 50 years bringing order and civilization to this galaxy. We have eliminated the chaos that once plagued these star systems. We have built a society based on strength and efficiency." What Crix did not mention was the cost of this order. Jake had seen the reports from human intelligence agents throughout Coalition space. Entire species had been enslaved or exterminated. Worlds with unique cultures had been strip-mined and abandoned. Children were taken from their families and raised as workers in Coalition factories. "The galaxy is ours now," Crix continued. "We have no rivals, no challenges to our authority. These phantom humans, if they ever existed, are long dead. We are the master race of this galaxy, and our empire will last for 10,000 years." The assembled delegates applauded, some more enthusiastically than others. Jake noticed that many of the newer Coalition members, species that had been conquered rather than joining willingly, showed little enthusiasm for Crix's speech. "That arrogance is going to be their downfall," Lisa observed quietly. "They're so convinced of their superiority that they can't imagine anyone challenging them." Jake was already packing up his surveillance equipment. The information they had gathered would be transmitted to the fleet within the hour. Admiral Blake would want to know the exact composition of the Coalition Council, their military deployment schedules, and their plans for further expansion. "The Coalition made one mistake when they attacked Earth," Jake said as they prepared to leave their hiding place. "They assumed that destroying our homeworld would break our spirit. Instead, it taught us that we could never again allow ourselves to be defenseless." As they crawled through the maintenance tunnels toward their hidden escape route, Jake thought about the massive human fleet that was even now moving into position throughout Coalition space. Ships that incorporated technology from a dozen different alien species, weapons that could penetrate any known defense system, and most importantly, crews that had spent their entire lives preparing for this moment. The Coalition had dismissed humans as legend. In 3 days, they would learn just how real legends could be when they returned with the fury of the righteous and the determination of the survivors. The galaxy was about to change forever, and humanity would no longer hide in the shadows of space. Captain Alex Turner stood on the bridge of the UES Frontier, watching the massive Coalition mining operation through his ship's advanced sensors. The human vessel remained hidden behind a small moon, its stealth systems making it invisible to alien detection equipment. Alex had been observing Coalition activities for 8 months, and what he had learned made his blood run cold. The Frontier was one of humanity's deep space reconnaissance ships, designed to look like an ordinary asteroid mining vessel to any casual observer. Its crew of 12 specialists had spent 3 years gathering intelligence in Coalition territory, always staying one step ahead of alien patrols. "Captain, we're picking up another transmission from the surface," called Chief Engineer Betty Williams from her station. The stocky woman had gray hair and steady hands that had kept the ship running through countless dangerous missions. "It's the same pattern we've been seeing for weeks." Alex moved to Betty's station and studied the data streaming across her screens. The transmissions were coded messages from the Coalition mining facility to their military headquarters. But it was the content of those messages that had kept Alex awake at night for the past month. "They're not just mining minerals down there," Alex said quietly. "They're processing something else entirely." The truth was worse than anything the human intelligence services had imagined. The Coalition wasn't just conquering worlds for their resources. They were systematically eliminating any species that showed signs of advanced intelligence or technological capability. The mining operations were cover stories for something far more sinister. Lieutenant Danny Morrison, the ship's communications officer, looked up from his console with a grim expression. The young man had joined the crew straight from the hidden academies in the outer system, full of enthusiasm for serving humanity's cause. That enthusiasm had been tempered by months of witnessing Coalition brutality. "Sir, I've been monitoring their military channels," Danny reported. "They're planning something called Operation Clean Sweep. It involves 30 star systems in the Kalari sector." Alex felt his stomach drop. The Kalari were one of the few species that had managed to resist Coalition conquest for more than a decade. Their homeworld was protected by natural barriers and advanced defensive systems that had made invasion too costly for the aliens to attempt. Until now. "What kind of operation?" Alex asked, though he suspected he already knew the answer. Danny's face was pale. "Complete sterilization, sir. They're planning to use biological weapons to kill every living thing on those worlds. Then they'll move in with automated systems to harvest whatever resources remain." Betty slammed her fist on her console. "Those monsters. The Kalari have families, children, entire civilizations. The Coalition wants to murder them all just to steal their planets." Alex activated the ship's secure communication system. This information had to reach Admiral Blake immediately. The human fleet was still weeks away from being ready for full-scale operations, but they might not have that luxury if the Coalition was planning genocide on this scale. "Frontier to Fleet Command," Alex transmitted. "Priority Alpha message. We have intelligence on imminent Coalition military action against neutral worlds. Request immediate conference with Admiral Blake." The response came back within minutes. Admiral Susan Blake's voice carried the weight of command that had held the scattered human colonies together for 5 decades. "Captain Turner, transmit your data immediately. We'll analyze it and respond within the hour." While they waited for orders, Alex gathered his senior staff in the ship's small briefing room. The walls displayed star charts showing Coalition territory and the locations of their military bases. Red markers indicated worlds that had been conquered or destroyed in the past year alone. "The Coalition isn't expanding randomly," Alex explained to his officers. "They have a systematic plan to eliminate every species in the galaxy that might eventually challenge their dominance. They start with the most advanced civilizations, then work their way down to simpler societies." Chief Science Officer Karen White had been studying Coalition technology for the entire mission. The tall woman with dark hair had degrees in xenobiology and comparative technology from the underground universities on Titan. Her analysis of alien capabilities had been crucial to human survival. "Captain, I've been reviewing their weapons systems," Karen reported. "The biological agents they're developing aren't just designed to kill specific species. They're engineered to destroy entire ecosystems. They want to leave nothing alive that could evolve into a threat." The implications were staggering. The Coalition wasn't just conquering the galaxy. They were trying to become the only intelligent life in it. Any species that showed signs of developing technology or culture was marked for extinction. "How many worlds have they already sterilized?" asked Medical Officer Paul Davis. The doctor had spent years treating refugees from Coalition attacks, and his hatred for the alien empire ran deep. Alex consulted his datapad. At least 47 confirmed cases in the past 10 years. Probably more that we haven't discovered yet. Billions of lives lost. Entire civilizations erased from history. The crew sat in stunned silence. They had known the Coalition was brutal, but this level of systematic genocide was beyond their worst fears. Alex looked around the table at faces, That showed the same mixture of horror and determination that he felt himself. "There's more," Alex continued. "According to their internal communications, they believe they've already eliminated all the major potential threats. They think humanity is extinct, of course. But they've also destroyed or enslaved every other species that had developed space travel or advanced technology." Security Chief Tony Rodriguez leaned forward. The former Marine had scars on his face from the battles during humanity's escape from Earth. "Sir, if they think they've already won, that gives us an advantage. They won't be expecting organized resistance." Before Alex could respond, the communication system chimed with an incoming message from Fleet Command. Admiral Blake's image appeared on the briefing room screen, and her expression was grim. "Captain Turner, we've reviewed your intelligence. Report," Blake began. "The information confirms our worst fears about coalition intentions. Operation Clean Sweep cannot be allowed to proceed." Alex straightened in his chair. "What are your orders, Admiral?" "You're to continue monitoring coalition communications and troop movements, but we're accelerating our timeline. Operation Ghostbreaker begins in 48 hours instead of the planned 72. We cannot allow the Kalari genocide to proceed." The Admiral's image flickered as she consulted something off-screen. "Captain, your ship and crew have provided invaluable intelligence over the past year. The information you've gathered will be crucial to our success. But I need to ask one more thing of you." "Anything, Admiral." "We need you to get closer to the Coalition command structure. There's a War Council meeting scheduled on Nexus Prime in 36 hours. We need to know their complete military deployment before we strike." Alex felt a chill run down his spine. Getting close to Nexus Prime would be incredibly dangerous. The station was surrounded by defense platforms and patrol ships. One mistake could mean death for his entire crew. "Understood, Admiral." "The Frontier will be in position." Blake's expression softened slightly. "Alex, I know what I'm asking, but if we're going to save the Kalari and expose the Coalition's crimes to the galaxy, we need that intelligence. The future of every free species depends on what we do in the next 2 days." After the transmission ended, Alex looked around the briefing room at his crew. These people had already risked their lives countless times for the mission. Now he was asking them to risk everything for one final intelligence-gathering operation. "You heard the Admiral," Alex said quietly. "We have 36 hours to reach Nexus Prime and get close enough to monitor their War Council meeting. It's going to be the most dangerous thing we've ever attempted." Betty Williams was the first to speak. "Captain, we've been running from the Coalition for 50 years. Maybe it's time we stopped running and started fighting back." One by one, the other officers nodded their agreement. They were ready to face whatever dangers lay ahead. The galaxy was counting on them, and they would not let humanity down. As the Frontier changed course toward the heart of Coalition territory, Alex thought about the billions of lives hanging in the balance. The Coalition believed they had already won, that they were the undisputed masters of the galaxy. In less than 2 days, they would learn how wrong they were. The Coalition mining station at Zerion Delta looked peaceful from a distance. The massive orbital platform hung in space above the planet like a silver jewel, its mining beams reaching down to extract precious metals from the surface. Thousands of workers, most of them slaves from conquered worlds, labored in the facility's dark corridors. Commander Pete Davis watched the station through the bridge windows of the UES Thunderstrike. The human warship had been hiding in the shadow of a nearby asteroid for 6 hours, waiting for the right moment to strike. Pete was 38 years old, with black hair and brown eyes that had seen too much suffering in Coalition space. "All ships report ready, Commander," announced Lieutenant Karen White from her position at the communications console. The young officer had trained for this moment her entire adult life. Around her, the bridge crew worked with quiet efficiency, checking weapon systems and shield generators. Pete activated his tactical display, showing the positions of 12 human warships spread throughout the Zerion system. Each vessel was invisible to Coalition sensors thanks to the advanced stealth technology humanity had developed during their years in exile. The aliens had no idea they were about to be attacked. "Attention all ships," Pete broadcast on the secure channel. "This is Thunderstrike Actual. Operation Ghostbreaker is now active, remember. We want to disable their facilities, not destroy them. There are innocent slaves down there who need our help. The response came back immediately from Captain Larry Brown of the UES Firestorm. Copy that, Thunderstrike. My boarding teams are ready to secure the prison levels as soon as we breach their defenses. Pete had studied the intelligence reports. From Captain Turner's reconnaissance mission, Xerion Delta was more than just a mining operation. The Coalition was using slave labor from dozens of different species, working them to death in the dangerous mineral extraction process. Children as young as 10 years old were forced to crawl through narrow mine shafts that adult workers could not reach. Commander, we're receiving a transmission from the station, reported Communications Officer Andy Clark. They're demanding to know who we are and ordering us to identify ourselves. Pete smiled grimly. The Coalition garrison had finally noticed the human ships as they dropped their stealth systems and moved into attack position. He opened a channel to the station's command center, where he knew the alien commanders would be scrambling to understand what was happening. Xerion Delta Control. This is Commander Pete Davis of the United Earth Space Command, Pete announced calmly. You are ordered to surrender immediately and release all prisoners in your custody. This facility is now under human control, the IBR. Response came back within seconds, transmitted by the station's Garathian commander. The alien's voice was deep and threatening, full of the arrogance that Pete had come to expect from Coalition officers. Humans are extinct, you fool, the commander snarled. Whatever species you represent, you will face the full might of the Coalition fleet. We do not negotiate with terrorists. Karen White looked up from her console with a questioning expression. Pete nodded to her and she activated the Thunderstrike's new plasma lance batteries. The devastating energy beams lanced out across space, striking the station's shield generators with pinpoint accuracy. The Coalition defenses, designed to stop conventional weapons, offered no protection against human technology. The plasma lances cut through their energy barriers like hot knives through ice, leaving the station completely vulnerable to further attack. What kind of weapons are those? Came a panicked voice from the station. Pete could hear alarms blaring in the background as Coalition forces tried to understand how their supposedly impenetrable shields had been destroyed so easily. Similar scenes were playing out across 20 Coalition facilities throughout the galaxy. Human strike forces had targeted mining operations, slave processing centers, and military supply bases. Each attack was carefully planned to minimize casualties among the enslaved populations while demonstrating humanity's technological superiority. Captain Tracy Johnson commanded the assault on the prison world of Darkness Prime, where the Coalition kept political prisoners from conquered species. Her ship, the UES Lightning, appeared directly above the planet's main detention facility without warning. This is Captain Johnson of the human fleet. She broadcast to the prison guards below. You have 60 seconds to unlock all cell blocks and withdraw your forces. Any guard who harms a prisoner will answer to me personally. The alien warden, a cruel Zephyrian named Slicks, initially tried to use the prisoners as hostages. His threats ended quickly when human boarding teams materialized inside the facility's most secure areas, their personal teleportation devices allowing them to bypass every defensive barrier. News of the coordinated attacks reached Nexus Prime within hours. The Coalition's Leadership Council, which had been debating trade agreements just that morning, found themselves facing a crisis that challenged everything they believed about their position in the galaxy. Ambassador Crix stood before a wall of displays showing the locations of human attacks. Red warning lights flashed across dozens of star systems as Coalition commanders reported the impossible, an enemy that could appear anywhere without warning and possessed weapons that made their defenses useless. This cannot be happening, Crix hissed to his aide, a nervous Centaurian named Vex. Our intelligence networks show no signs of any major military buildup in the outer systems. Where did these ships come from? The answer came in the form of a holographic transmission that appeared in the center of the council chamber without any warning. The Coalition's most secure facility had been penetrated as easily as their military bases, demonstrating capabilities that terrified the alien leaders. Admiral Susan Blake materialized before the shocked council members, her image crystal clear, despite being transmitted across hundreds of light years. She wore the blue uniform of the United Earth Space Command, with insignia that no living alien had seen for over 50 years. "Greetings, members of the Coalition Council," Blake said, with cold politeness. "I am Admiral Susan Blake, commanding officer of the human fleet. I believe we need to have a conversation." The council chamber erupted in panic and confused shouting. Some delegates tried to flee while others demanded to know how the transmission was possible. Through it all, Blake stood motionless, her calm presence more intimidating than any threat. Crix recovered his composure first, his scales darkening with rage. "This is impossible. Humans were wiped out 53 years ago when we destroyed your pathetic homeworld. You cannot exist." "And yet here I am," Blake replied with a slight smile. "For 5 decades you have believed that destroying Earth meant the end of humanity. You were wrong. We survived. We adapted. We grew stronger while you grew complacent." She gestured, and the holographic display changed to show images of the attacks currently taking place across Coalition space. Human ships moved like ghosts through alien defenses, their weapons cutting through the most advanced shields as if they were made of paper. "The Coalition stands accused of crimes against intelligent life itself," Blake continued. "Systematic, genocide, enslavement of entire species, the destruction of cultures and civilizations. We have evidence of your plans to sterilize 47 star systems, killing billions of innocent beings." Several council members tried to interrupt, but Blake's voice cut through their protests like a blade. "You have built your empire on the bones of the weak and the suffering of the enslaved. You believed that might made right, that your superior technology gave you the authority to decide which species deserved to live." Crix found his voice again, though it shook with fury. "You cannot threaten the Coalition with a handful of primitive ships. Our fleet numbers in the thousands. We have controlled this galaxy for 3 centuries. Blake's expression never changed, but something cold and dangerous flickered in her eyes. "Ambassador Crix, you are about to learn that quantity means nothing when facing superior human determination and ingenuity. We have had 50 years to study your weaknesses and develop weapons you cannot imagine." The transmission ended abruptly, leaving the council chamber in stunned silence. Around the galaxy, Coalition forces were discovering the truth of Blake's words as human technology proved superior to anything they had encountered before. The age of Coalition dominance was ending, and a new chapter in galactic history was about to begin. Supreme Fleet Commander Vex stood in the command center of the massive Coalition dreadnought Eternal Glory, watching display screens that showed the greatest military force ever assembled by his people. 300 warships stretched across space in perfect formation, their weapons charged and ready for battle. This was the pride of the Coalition fleet, ships that had conquered 1,000 worlds and crushed every enemy they had ever faced. "These pathetic humans think they can challenge the might of the Coalition," Vex declared to his senior officers. The tall Zephyrian commander had scales that gleamed like polished metal, and his yellow eyes burned with confidence. "Today we will show the galaxy what happens to those who dare oppose us." The Coalition fleet had been hastily assembled from bases across their territory. When news of the human attacks reached the High Command, Vex had been given unlimited authority to crush this unexpected threat. He planned to make the battle so one-sided that no other species would ever consider rebellion again. Captain Roy Mitchell watched the approaching alien armada from the bridge of his experimental stealth destroyer, the UES Phantom. His ship was invisible to Coalition sensors, allowing him to observe their formations and count their numbers. The human officer was 42 years old, with gray hair and steady hands that had guided his vessel through dozens of dangerous reconnaissance missions. "Sir, I count 312 enemy ships," reported Lieutenant Danny Morrison from the sensor station. "They have us outnumbered 5-1, just like intelligence predicted." Roy smiled at the young officer's nervous tone. "Danny, you're thinking like the Coalition does. They believe that having more ships automatically means winning the battle. They're about to learn why that kind of thinking got them into this mess." The human fleet was much smaller than their enemy, but every ship incorporated technology that the Coalition could not understand. Admiral Blake had positioned her forces carefully, using the gravity wells of nearby planets to mask their approach. The aliens would not detect the human fleet until the battle had already begun. On the bridge of the UES Retribution, Admiral Blake studied tactical displays that showed both fleets in real time. Her flagship was a massive vessel, nearly as large as the enemy dreadnought, but its weapon systems were decades ahead of anything the Coalition possessed. "All ships, this is Admiral Blake," she broadcast on the secure channel. "The enemy is approaching in standard Coalition formation. They expect to overwhelm us with superior numbers and firepower. Instead, we will show them what human ingenuity can accomplish when properly applied." Captain Gary Nelson of the UES Devastator checked his ship's weapon systems one final time. The plasma cannons were charged and ready, their targeting computers locked onto the enemy fleet's command ships. Gary had lost his entire family when the Coalition destroyed Earth, and he had spent 50 years preparing for this moment of revenge. "Sir, all weapons show green across the board," reported his weapons officer, Lieutenant Amy Parker. "The new quantum torpedoes are loaded and ready to fire." Gary nodded grimly. The quantum torpedoes were humanity's secret weapon, developed by scientists who had studied Coalition technology for decades. Each torpedo could penetrate any known shield system and deliver a payload that would disable even the largest enemy, warship. The battle began exactly as the Coalition expected. Their massive fleet advanced in traditional formation, with the largest ships in the center and smaller vessels protecting the flanks. Commander Vex stood confidently on his bridge, certain that the humans would be crushed within minutes. "All ships open fire," Vex commanded. "Show these primitives the power of the Coalition." Thousands of energy beams lanced out across space, lighting up the darkness with deadly rainbow colors. The Coalition weapons were powerful enough to crack planets, and Vex expected to see human ships exploding under the massive barrage. Instead, something impossible happened. The human vessels seemed to flicker and fade, appearing and disappearing like ghosts. Coalition targeting computers lost their locks as enemy ships phased in and out of normal space, making them impossible to hit with conventional weapons. "What is happening?" Vex demanded, staring at his tactical displays in confusion. "Where did they go?" The answer came in the form of human ships materializing directly inside the Coalition formation. Roy Mitchell's stealth destroyer appeared behind the enemy flagship, its weapons already firing. The Phantom's plasma cannons struck the Eternal Glory's engine section with surgical precision, disabling the massive ship's propulsion systems in seconds. Similar scenes played out across the battlefield as human vessels used their advanced technology to outmaneuver and outfight their enemies. The phase drive systems allowed them to shift partially out of normal space, making them nearly impossible to target while they lined up perfect shots on Coalition vessels. Captain Helen Parker commanded the UES Shockwave, one of humanity's newest assault cruisers. Her ship appeared directly above a Coalition battle group, its quantum torpedoes streaking down toward the enemy vessels like falling stars. Each torpedo found its target, penetrating alien shields and delivering electromagnetic pulses that shut down entire ships. "Direct hits on all targets," reported her tactical officer. "Enemy vessels are dead in space, but life support is still functioning. Minimal casualties, just like the Admiral ordered." The human strategy was not to destroy the Coalition fleet, but to disable it completely. Admiral Blake wanted to capture as many enemy ships as possible, both to study their technology and to demonstrate humanity's superiority without unnecessary bloodshed. Commander Vex watched in horror as his mighty fleet was systematically dismantled by an enemy that seemed to violate every law of physics. Human ships moved faster than should be possible. Their weapons hit harder than anything he had encountered, and their defensive systems made them nearly invulnerable to Coalition attacks. "How are they doing this?" Vex shouted at his science officer. "Our sensors show they should be outnumbered and outgunned." The answer came from Captain Sharon Miller, whose research vessel UES Explorer had spent years analyzing Coalition weaknesses. Her ship appeared on the main display screen, and her voice carried across all Coalition communication channels. "Because while you grew comfortable and lazy, we learned and adapted," Sharon explained calmly. You believed that destroying Earth would break our spirit. Instead, it taught us never to be helpless again. The human vessels continued their devastating attack, appearing and disappearing throughout the coalition formation. Each strike was precisely calculated to disable rather than destroy, leaving enemy crews alive but their ships completely powerless. Captain Larry Brown led a squadron of human fighters that swarmed around the larger coalition vessels like angry wasps. The small craft were faster and more maneuverable than anything the aliens had ever seen, their pilots trained to use three-dimensional thinking that confused enemy gunners. "This is Lightning Squadron," Larry broadcast to his pilots. "Target their weapon systems and shield generators. Let's show them what human pilots can do when we're properly motivated." The coalition fleet, which had seemed so mighty just hours before, was rapidly becoming a collection of floating wrecks. Ships that had conquered dozens of worlds found themselves helpless against human technology and tactics that they could not understand or counter. By the time the battle ended, less than 50 coalition vessels remained capable of movement. The rest drifted powerlessly in space, their crews stunned and demoralized by a defeat that should have been impossible. Commander Vex sat in his command chair, staring at the tactical displays that showed the complete destruction of his fleet. The humans had done the impossible, defeating a force 5 times their size without suffering any significant losses of their own. "This cannot be happening," he whispered. "We are the coalition. We are the masters of this galaxy." Admiral Blake's image appeared on his screen, her calm expression more frightening than any threat. "Commander Vex, your fleet is defeated. Your ships are disabled. Your crews are at our mercy. I suggest you consider the lesson we have taught you today, the year." Galaxy watched in amazement as the legendary humans proved themselves not only real, but devastatingly effective in battle. The news of the coalition's crushing defeat spread across the galaxy like wildfire. On 100 different worlds, enslaved populations who had lived under alien rule for generations began to whisper about the legendary humans who had returned to challenge their oppressors. In secret meetings and hidden chambers, resistance leaders shared the impossible story of how 50 human ships had destroyed 300 coalition vessels without losing a single one of their own. Admiral Susan Blake stood on the observation deck of her flagship, looking out at the liberated world of Haven Prime. The planet had once been a coalition slave processing center, where millions of beings from conquered species were sorted and shipped to labor camps throughout the Empire. Now it served as the headquarters for humanity's growing liberation movement. The rescued prisoners filled temporary camps across the planet's surface. Blake could see the lights from thousands of shelters where former slaves were receiving food, medical care, and their first taste of freedom in years. Children who had never known anything but captivity were learning to play and laugh again. "Admiral, the latest reports from our diplomatic teams," said Captain Bill Roberts, approaching, with a datapad in his hands. The former Starship commander had volunteered to head the new Galactic Liberation Council, working to establish democratic governments on the freed worlds. Blake took the pad and studied the information. The numbers were staggering. In just 2 weeks since the Great Battle, 17 coalition member worlds had declared independence and requested human protection. Entire species that had been enslaved for generations were rising up against their captors. "The Kalari resistance has retaken their homeworld," Bill reported. "They're asking for human advisors to help them rebuild their government. The Shardling refugees want to establish a new colony on Titan 7, and the Moth people are requesting transport ships to return to their original star system." Blake nodded thoughtfully. The responsibility of guiding so many species toward freedom was enormous. Humanity had returned to the galaxy seeking justice for the destruction of Earth, but they had found themselves becoming the champions of every oppressed people in known space. "What about the coalition remnants?" Blake asked. "Any word from Ambassador Crix?" Bill's expression darkened. "He's still refusing to negotiate. The hardline faction has retreated to their core worlds and is calling for total war against humanity. They'd rather see the galaxy burn than admit they were wrong." On the distant world of Nexus Prime, Ambassador Crix stood before the few Coalition Council members who still supported his leadership. The once mighty empire was crumbling around them as world after world abandoned their cause. Trade routes had collapsed, military units were deserting, and even longtime allies were questioning their loyalty to the coalition. "We will never surrender to these human terrorists," Crix declared, his scales dark with rage. "The coalition has ruled this galaxy for 3 centuries. We will not allow a handful of primitive survivors to destroy everything we have built." The remaining council members looked uncertain. They had seen the battle reports, witnessed the complete destruction of their most powerful fleet. Some were beginning to wonder if continued resistance was worth the price their people would pay. Councillor Thex, an elderly Centaurian who had served the coalition for 40 years, raised a trembling hand. "Ambassador, perhaps we should consider the human terms. They offer amnesty to those who surrender peacefully. We could save millions of lives." Crix turned on the old councillor with fury. "Amnesty? From beings we declared extinct? The coalition does not beg for mercy from inferior species. We will fight until the last ship, the last soldier, the last breath in our bodies." But even as Crix spoke these words, his empire continued to fall apart. Coalition military commanders were surrendering their fleets rather than face human forces in hopeless battles. Civilian populations were welcoming human liberation teams as heroes who had freed them from decades of oppression. Captain Julie Adams led one of these diplomatic missions to the industrial world of Forge Prime. Her ship, the UES Harmony, carried supplies and medical aid for the planet's workers who had been forced to labor in dangerous factories for the Coalition war machine. "Captain, we're receiving surrender signals from the orbital defense platforms," reported her communications officer. "The garrison commander wants to negotiate terms." Julie smiled with relief. Each peaceful surrender meant thousands of lives saved and another step toward ending the galactic conflict. Her mission was to offer protection and freedom to any coalition world willing to abandon the empire. "Tell them we accept their surrender," Julie replied. "Prepare humanitarian aid packages for immediate distribution, and send word to Admiral Blake that we have another liberated world." Similar scenes were playing out across dozens of star systems as the coalition's authority collapsed. Species that had been conquered generations ago were reclaiming their independence, with human support. Ancient cultures that had been suppressed were being restored. Children were learning the languages and traditions that the coalition had tried to eliminate. On Haven Prime, Admiral Blake worked with representatives from 20 different species to establish the framework for a new galactic government. The meeting took place in a vast conference hall that had once been used to process slaves. Now it hosted discussions about freedom, democracy, and mutual cooperation. The Terran Federation proposes a council structure where each species has equal representation, Blake explained to the assembled delegates. No single race would have the power to dominate others. All major decisions would require consensus among the member worlds. The response was overwhelmingly positive. Species that had lived under coalition tyranny for generations embraced the chance to govern themselves and work together as equals. The contrast with the old empire, where might made right and the strong crushed the weak, could not have been greater. Dr. Martha Davis, one of humanity's leading xenobiologists, presented plans for rebuilding worlds that had been damaged by coalition strip mining and industrial pollution. "We have the technology to restore these ecosystems," she explained, "but it will take time and cooperation from all the affected species." The work was enormous, but the enthusiasm was infectious. Former enemies were learning to work together toward common goals. Scientists shared knowledge that had been restricted under coalition rule. Artists created works celebrating the diversity of galactic culture. The final confrontation came when Admiral Blake decided to travel to Nexus Prime itself. She arrived with a small diplomatic fleet, showing the same courage that had defined humanity's return to the galaxy. Her ships took position around the coalition capital while she prepared to address the surviving council members. "I'm going alone," Blake announced to her staff, despite their protests. "If we're going to build a lasting peace, it has to start with trust and honest communication." She walked into the coalition council chamber without weapons or guards, facing the assembled alien leaders who had once dismissed her species as legend. The same room where Crix had declared humans extinct now hosted a woman whose people had proven their strength and determination. The age of coalition dominance is over, Blake stated simply. You can choose to be part of building something better based on cooperation and mutual respect, or you can cling to your failing empire until it destroys everything you claim to protect. The debate that followed lasted for hours. Crix and his supporters argued for continued resistance, while moderate voices called for negotiation and peace. In the end, reason prevailed over pride. The coalition voted to dissolve their empire and join the new galactic community as equal members. Years later, Ambassador Jake Peterson stood before a gathering of young beings from dozens of different species. They were students at the new Galactic Academy on Haven Prime, learning about the history that had brought their peoples together. Remember, Jake told them, humanity didn't return for conquest or revenge. We came back to prove that hope, determination, and the refusal to surrender can overcome any darkness. That's the true power of the human spirit, and it's something that belongs to all of us now. The galaxy had learned to never again dismiss any species as mere legend. The age of cooperation had begun.